for coming. We are very excited about this program today, and particularly the speaker that we have lined up. So I'm going to introduce Saffron. She's a licensed mental health counselor and doctoral candidate at Barry University, and she delivers motivational seminars, professional training, and is a guest speaker at a variety of venues. She's one of the key counselors conducting the debriefings for the first responders of the Pulse nightclub shooting here in Orlando, and she is part of numerous EAPs for Central Florida. She's on the leadership committee for Take Stock in Children in Brevard County and a regular volunteer in the community. She's the clinical director at Vero Beach Counseling Center and supervises therapy interns, creates new training programs for mental illness patients, and works on a variety of projects throughout the area. So we're very excited to have Saffron with us, and part of the reason why we wanted to schedule this session this way is we wanted to start off with a little bit of an announcement. When you think of what's been going on in the media recently, you really can't turn on the news without seeing something related to harassment or disparity or an equity issue. It's taken on the form of wearing all black to an awards show. It has hashtag not, it's on us, hashtag now's the time, and let's stop this. And so I've been watching this, and I got to thinking that there are so many amazing resources throughout campus. Why can we not have something here for Florida Tech? So I'm looking for a group of volunteers who would be willing to serve on a task force with HR, and we want to create a hashtag called Not Here, where the H and the R is capitalized. And the idea behind that is that we are going to take a proactive stance to be the university where it's not going to happen here. We're not going to be the ones to show up on some sort of a news story, media story, interview, or something where everybody wonders, why wasn't this looked at before? And so this is a very grassroots from within effort, and I think that there is a lot we could do with it. In talking with Rodney, this is a program that we could roll out to the students to say that we're better than this. We're better than what we see in the news stories. We can be better. And how do we do that? And how do we create that? So if you're interested, please let Linda or I know. We'll be starting task force meetings within the next couple of weeks so we can put some teeth around this program. And we'd really love to have it branch out through the entire campus community. So more to come on that, but you all will start hearing and seeing things about Not Here. Let's be proactive. Let's make the difference so that the students and the employees don't feel like they ever even thought that there was an issue at Florida Tech. So something to noodle on. All right, Ms. Saffron, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing this morning? It's a great way to spend your Friday morning, isn't it? I know, it's a very sensitive subject, and if anyone was listening to the news this morning, the Missouri governor, Greitens, I see some heads nodding. If you haven't heard about it yet, you're going to. And so he had a affair, right? And took some pictures of the person he was with, and she did not know. She didn't know that he had taken those pictures. Of course, it's become a big court case, and this is all second, third, and fourth-hand information, but he used those pictures to attempt to get her to continue the relationship. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you think you know everything that there is to know about sexual harassment. Raise your hand if you're not. Oh, so you need to tell me if you leave here with any more knowledge than you have right now. Anybody else? Okay. I don't want to waste your time. I want to make sure that you are entertained. I want to make sure that you're learning something new. And most importantly, I want to let you know that there's going to be a break in about 45 minutes. Does anybody have a very pressing question that they want to make sure is answered during this presentation? No. Okay. Well, thanks for setting the bar high for me. I'm good to go then. So a little bit about me. I'm a mama of four. I have a daughter at Duke University, a daughter who's an engineer at UCF, a son who's trying to become a pilot, also graduated from UCF, and they all were born and raised right here in Brevard County. So I have a vested interest in this county. That being said, I'm also single in Brevard County, and everybody knows what a difficult thing that is. So my telephone number is on these cards, and if you know someone, feel free to let them know. My dissertation proposal just got approved, so I'm smooth sailing now. I'll have my doctorate finished this semester. So I'm a catch, okay? A catch. I have no debt. My house is paid for. I have a sports car and an SUV, and does anybody feel like this might be sexual harassment? Okay. So I want to give you just a little bit of information about what your awareness for supervisors is going to look like. Today's seminar is intended just to raise your awareness. I also want you to be a little bit more comfortable about it. Everybody's a little bit sensitive about talking about sexual harassment. What is it? Should this be considered it? When in doubt, just reach out. So I want you to ask somebody. If you're not sure, ask somebody. This seminar is not intended to satisfy any legal obligation, and I think it's very important that I'm going to tell you what the laws are, but when in doubt, check it out, okay? If we talk about the objectives for today, it's to recognize behavior that could be considered sexual harassment. It's also to help create an environment free of sexual harassment. Think that if we had an environment free of sexual harassment, everybody could be more their best self. Remember in the olden days where the garages would give you these calendars with very risqué-ly dressed? Times have changed, times have changed. I don't think FIT is going to be putting out a little something for everyone to keep by their desk, And some people will say, well, all the calendars are now electronic. But it's very important to know, even bringing something onto the campus with male or female, it's completely interchangeable, dressed a little bit more risqué-ly could be considered sexual harassment. So I want you to know what to do if you suspect sexual harassment. Nobody here is an investigator. Nobody has to take it just upon themselves. You have resources of who to get in touch with, and I want you to understand what your organization's policies are and look at your support system here. Linda, if they have a question, they can always come to you and ask, right? So I want you to understand what those are. Would you take just a minute? There's a little black and white test. It's right on the very front of a little stapled thing. Take a few minutes and answer these questions, because you're going to have an opportunity to see what your knowledge base is about this topic. It's not going to be graded. This is just for your own knowledge, and then we're going to go through it at the end. After the break, we'll go through it and we'll determine if you learned something new. If you're not sure about some answers, I'm going to give you some little cheat sheets that are attached to the test. So you're more than welcome to take a look at that. I'm going to give you just 20 more seconds if anybody wants to finish it up. All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about protected classes. I have a tiny little accent. I had a speech coach who was actually from New York, so sometimes I'll sound like I'm from New York, but I'm actually from Johannesburg, South Africa, so that you don't have to spend any of your time trying to figure out where my accent's from. I'm just going to put that out there. But our protected class, it's a term used in the United States. It's the Anti-Discrimination Law. And if you take a look on your little sexual harassment sheet, right in the very front, at the bottom, it has all of the different laws that you might want to familiarize yourself with. There are several protected classes under the current law. They are including everything. Basically, if you're pregnant, you're under that. If you feel that you're being discriminated against, you're under that. But the laws are important just to be mindful of, not to have to memorize. The Civil Rights Act, which was 1964, put the protected classes as race, color, gender, religion, and then national origin. If you are curious, you can look into these. They were later added, the ageism, someone who was 40 years or older was added. And then, of course, national origin. Ancestry, disability, the ADA, veteran status, pregnancy, and retaliation. Is anybody familiar with the retaliation phrase? Okay, that's if you actually file a complaint for sexual harassment, you're now protected in that area of the protected classes. Discrimination and harassment. There's two different things that we're looking at here. What's the difference? Discrimination means being treated less fairly than others, and harassment is a form of discrimination. So do we understand the difference between those two words? Discrimination means you're being treated less fairly than others for a reason that's not related to your job performance. And then harassment falls under discrimination, so it's a form of discrimination. The definition of harassment is to disturb, torment, or pester on a persistent basis, and persistent is the key thing there. If somebody does something to you just one time or does something to one of the people that you supervise, often that's not considered harassment. You know, if they might not be aware that that's an issue, but it's important to know that the definition is on a persistent basis. Majority of any of the successful court cases have been persistent, redundant things. What does it look like? It can be physical, can be visual, can be verbal actions. Slander. Do you have a question? Go ahead. Can ask me.
So, one time so pervasive, is not counting anymore?
If it is pervasive, yes. Yes. I'm not saying it's never one time. I'm saying majority of the time it's a persistent thing. Something really egregious could happen, and that's completely sexual harassment, absolutely. And I apologize if I wasn't clear about that. But creating an offensive, intimidating, or hostile work environment, or negatively affecting someone's work performance or their employee opportunity. And I'm going to go into real detail about that. Again, ask a question if you feel like I'm not covering it. Illegal behavior in the workplace. The Equal Employee Opportunity Council is the governing agency on these things. And the discriminatory treatment of a member of one protected class, remember we went through those, the sex, the race, here I'll go through these again. these are the people that are protected. So who does that include? What if you are 37 and don't fall into any of those? Well, anybody can fall into this category right here, right? So it's just a way of saying everybody. Everybody's protected. Harassment is illegal when it involves discriminated treatment of a member of one of the protected classes, and it really does include everybody in here. They just have to go through with your legality laws, if you look along the bottom there, to say this is what part of discrimination you are being discriminated for. Per law, the individuals convicted of sexual harassment may be held personally liable. What does that mean? This was a new law that was established majority of the time in an organization. A lot of the laws apply to organizations that have 15 or more employees. So if the guy mowing your lawn just is his very own business and does something that finds offensive, it falls under a different law. So this is all, we live in a litigious society. Would anybody agree we live in a litigious society? And I hate to use the CYA. Everybody knows what that one is. I don't have to say it out loud. It's important to do that, especially if there are people of 15 or more, organizations 15 or more. But what this is saying is that if I offend you or if I harass you persistently or one egregious act, yes, they can come back and sue the university, but they can also come to me and sue me. Remember I told you I paid off my house and my car. They could try to take those away. So I personally am liable for those things. Does that make sense? So the person that's doing it, a lot of people are like, doesn't fall on me if I'm doing something inappropriate, but it actually does, and that's a new thing. So you can be sued based on your own behavior, even in an organization. So the sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination that violates the Title VII. This was in 1964. They did add during Clinton's administration in 2000 sexual preference to this, so your LGBT community. These include unwelcome sexual advances. So every organization has a different rule about fraternization. Could someone that you are equal with, not a division of power, ask you to go out for dinner? As long as it wasn't considered an unwelcome sexual advance, that may be appropriate based on your organization. It is also not okay if it's a request for sexual favors, okay? Sexual favors. Again, since the Clinton administration, what's considered sexual favors? It could be anything that's inappropriate. It could be texting, or now we call it sexting. It could be verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. It can be as simple as someone who just, I don't know if you guys know the word Freuderism, but it's when someone rubs against somebody else in the elevator or in passing. That could be considered sexual harassment. It could be something very minor and something massive. And it's based on perception. It's not the intention of the person. If the elevator is super crowded every time that person gets on and they don't intend to actually touch up against somebody else, that doesn't matter. It's what the person that's being rubbed up against perceives the issue to be. So I think that's very important for us to understand, and as supervisors, I think it's super important, because if somebody comes to you and their perception is that they've been sexually harassed, you can't dismiss them, because it's based on what their perception is. Okay, anybody have any questions about that? But I am going to give you more information about this. Sexual harassment can occur in a variety of circumstances. It includes, but is not limited to, the following. The victim as well of the harasser may be a woman or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. The victim does not have to be of the opposite sex. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, an agent of the employee, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or, like me, a non-employee, okay? The victim does not have to be the person harassed, but could be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. So, let's say you walk in and find two of your coworkers in what could be offensive to you, physical interaction. That could be considered sexual harassment. You're not actually being physically touched, but you are seeing something that you might not be okay with. Again, does anybody have a question about that? Yes, I see you. I saw your face. You're like, what? Do you want me, how graphic do you want me to get?
I find it offensive.
Yes.
But they're not doing anything to me. I walked in on them.
Yes. They don't have to be doing anything to you. It's your perception of if you've been sexually harassed by seeing somebody else engaged in sexual behavior.
And the mechanics calendar.
Yes.
So the mechanics calendar, so that's just up there to have.
Yes. If someone comes
Walks
in,
in, finds it offensive,
yes,
but that's sexual harassment.
Yes.
it is.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Definition of the law, absolutely.
Talk about a third-party harassment.
Third party harassment. Yes, I will. I know that it can seem very minor, but that's why I'm trying so difficult. Everybody's perception is different. And so what might seem very minor to you might seem egregious to another individual.
It could be unbelievably offensive.
Absolutely.
But it's not directed at the particular person that happened to walk into the office.
Yes.
Take it home.
Yes.
It's another situation as a instructor.
Yes. As an
Let's say-
instructor,
okay, a teacher. You're teaching a class that involves art history.
art history,
And we show some classic art.
like the statue of David, that beautiful
Well,
statue.
any of that stuff. And a student finds it disturbing. Has that student been sexually harassed?
That student has been sexually harassed if they say something about it and they don't want to have to participate in it and they're forced to. Or it's going to impact their grade if they choose not to, okay? And remember how I said it has to be repetitive? Unless it's unless it's something egregious. If it is part of the class, then, someone else want to say something? If it is part of the class, then it's up to that person to come to you and say, you know what, I kind of am offended by this. This is something that's uncomfortable for me. And then you would make, obviously, accommodation for that
If the instructor
individual.
makes an adjustment, an accommodation.
Yes.
Then it's over. That student cannot say, well, I saw it once, and even though there was an accommodation, I'm still offended.
You know what? The student is welcome to say whatever they want to. And here's where I am going to encourage you to document everything. At 7:45, this student told me that they are upset about this. Document, 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 because that's going to be the determining factor of what the intention and the perception was. And that's going to also, remember how I said it takes multiple incidents sometimes for there to be an actual successful lawsuit, okay? But it is perception. That was a very good question, very good question. Again, unlawful sexual harassment may occur without any kind of an economic injury. So the sexual harassment could be to someone, but not impact what their paycheck is, not impact if they get a promotion or not impact their actual financial benefit to working for an organization. It's independent of that. And the harasser's conduct must be unwelcome, okay? So if it is someone that you've invited out for dinner, they think that you're very handsome, and again, it's a slippery slope, because how do you know if they're going to welcome your advances or not? This source right here, the EEOC that I told you about, the Equal Employee Opportunity Council, goes through and gives you more information. So you all have this website. They're very clear. They have all kinds of little vignettes, and we're going to do some case studies at the very end just to make sure that everybody understands. We're good to go to the next one? Yes? This is a very, very beneficial harassment chart, and everybody in this room has it, and there are extra handouts if there's someone that couldn't make it today that you know could benefit from it. So remember how I said discrimination? Harassment is a sub of discrimination. You then have what's called quid pro quo. quid pro quo is the level of, here, if I just have a regular employee who's just my peer, that's not a quid pro quo. They don't have any kind of inequality of power, okay? Quid pro quo is if my supervisor or my supervisor's boss, or it has to be a, do you have a question about that? Ask your question. Quid pro quo, it has to be an unlevel power. It has to be the person that has power over the other individual, okay? Otherwise, it's a hostile environment. So verbal and nonverbal may be the calendar. Nonverbal would be just the calendar. Yes, sir?
Does the quid pro quo, what if you're in two totally different lineages at an institution?
Yes.
Say one's a coach,
Yes.
and one is a professor.
Very good question. Very good question. That is kind of a gray areas, but you're not peers, right?
What do you mean by peers?
Like you're not equal in the employment arena.
It's hard to say. Again, one's a coach, they're under a whole athletic world, and one is a professor under.
But they all fall under the university.
all fall under the university.
They all fall
They
under the
work.
university, yes.
You know, one may have more visibility, et
Yes?
cetera, but they're not, they don't, it's not a supervisee relationship. How is that regarded as quid pro quo, or where does that fit?
I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay.
Okay? So, quid pro quo, it means this for that. It's the Latin phrase, this for that. Okay? It's if there is a favor given, a promotion given in exchange for some form of sexual favor. It's this type of harassment is a person who is in a power position. They have to be in a power position over the person that they're making the sexual advances to. Okay? Now, this is also very important. If the person chooses to engage in the sexual advance, it's still sexual harassment, even if they've made the choice to engage in it, because there is that inequality of power. Okay? That's very important for me to explain this to you. The person that's being sexually harassed could comply by their harasser's advances because they don't want their job to be influenced, because they don't want their performance review to be influenced. They can comply with the person's advances. It's still considered sexual harassment. Okay? Yes? It's still sexual harassment. It's still sexual harassment. It's sexual harassment on the, so if I am continuously imposing myself on my boss, okay, there's still a division of power there, but it's not quid pro quo. Quid pro quo is if they have a way to impact my performance. That's a hostile environment. Okay?
But on the lower person, the lower ranked person is going to be accused.
The lower ranked person is the accused, and so now it's sexual harassment. It's the quid pro quo. It's a hostile, it's not quid pro quo because there's not the division of power. It's now hostile work environment. Let me go back to that. Sexual harassment is divided between quid pro quo, division of power, and hostile environment. So this one is, so your review's coming up tomorrow. I'd like to take you out to a movie tonight, and then, you know, let's see what your raise percentage is going to look like. Okay? This is sexual favors for advancement. I'd like you to meet me in my office at 9 a.m. so that the rest of my day is going to go well so I can release my sexual intentions. I'm your boss. Please make sure that you're there by 8:45. Okay? Refusal, which is retaliation or loss of promotion, also comes under quid pro quo. Nope, I'm not going to be at your office at 8:45, or no, I'm not going to the movies with you tonight. And they're like, so sorry about that raise. That's just not going to be happening now. Make it more clear for you? Yes. Yes, you have a question, sir?
I'm just curious if we can clarify that the position of power is not always equated to rank. You know,
No.
if someone has knowledge of something, like I know that you skipped work,
Yes.
and so they could be lower ranked in the organization, but because they have that knowledge, they could create a quid pro kind of exchange from a position of power because of their knowledge?
It would fall under hostile environment. And it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't,
Organizational structure, right?
the power, yes. It doesn't have to be financial. It doesn't have to be you're not going to get that raise. It could be you're not going to get the plum teaching position. It could be, well, I'm going to put you in this less favorable place. You're going to be sweeping out the stockroom instead of having someone bring you supplies from the stockroom. Do you understand? So that's not just money, okay? So the harassed employee believes. Why do you think we put this here? Believes.
Perception.
Perception. Yay! See, you guys all did learn something, right, today? It's your perception. I like to learn at least one new thing each day. So there we go. He or she must go along with it to receive the promotion, the raise, the special assignment, or to even keep their job. Okay? And the promotion doesn't have to be a promotion that comes with the raise. It could just be a prestige promotion. Still falls under the quid pro quo.
Can I give one example? of
Yes,
that too?
please.
So from a power standpoint, it could be the supervisor saying to the employee, you know, there's the potential for a job change coming up, and I don't have time to discuss it with you today. Why don't we go to dinner after work?
Yes.
And we'll talk about it over dinner tonight.
Did you hear over there what she was saying? Yes. It could be something like that. And for someone that doesn't think that that's inappropriate, would that be quid pro quo? No, because it's the perception. Go ahead, sorry.
It's totally consensual, and I don't think it's offensive.
Then you're good to go.
What if 2 months later they come back and say, you know, I was...
And that's where, as supervisors, you have to tread very carefully, because she made a very good point. What if it was completely okay? What if you went for dinner and that's all that happened was the position was discussed and nothing else happened? 2 months later, that person can still come back and say they believe their perception was.
I don't know about FIT, but I mean,
It's retaliation if they file a complaint. Then they fall under that protected class. What was your question, sir?
But dinner negotiations, before I came to FIT, that was commonplace.
Yes. But it was also very commonplace to have a calendar with half-naked ladies in your office. So these are not things that are happening anymore, or ideally should not be happening in the case that someone may be offended by it. So yes, you have to be thinking about these things. Now, what if you're on your phone and you're looking at pornography? But you're not imposing it on someone else, but you happen to be sitting next to them and they can't avoid seeing it. Or you're sitting behind them and they continue to see that. That still is considered sexual harassment. Your intention is not to make the other person feel harassed. Your intention is not to impose that upon yourself, but the person is not okay with the pornography being right there. That is considered sexual harassment. I know there's a lot of specifics, but please feel free to go to that EEOC site if you want some more information. So the quid pro quo, again, it's particularly important that as a manager or supervisor, you become aware of any personal behaviors or habits that could be, here's our word again, perceived. Something that could be perceived. And like you said, it could be something that has been done for decades. Could be something that's been done for decades. It's not okay just because it's always been done that way. If someone's perception of that situation, the supervisor, manager to the subordinate, that's quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How much also comes down to documentation? I mean, you mentioned the case with Dr. Taylor here in the classroom, but if someone is doing something, someone else perceives
Yes.
it as harassment, yet the first person is never told, and all of a sudden they get a call from HR.
Yes.
And they say, what do you mean? I had no idea. And
Yes.
it's true, they were never told. Does that matter?
It does matter.
Okay.
It does. And that's why you have to always be so aware of how things can be perceived. Because it would fall under quid pro quo if they were the subordinate. If they were not, it would fall under harassment.
But you're gonna have to be told, you can't just say, for the last 6 years, you've been saying, I love you, honey,
Yes.
at lunch on the phone,
And
and I
you're-
don't like that.
Yeah,
But
and
I
you're
can
going
say
to hear that as one of the things is the words that people use, terms of endearment. But yes, so what would happen is the human resources would then, you want to take this one, would happen?
We would, yep, we would have a conversation with you to say, over the last 6 years, you've been saying, I love you, honey bunny, and there is a concern has come forward to us, and so it needs to stop effective immediately. And then we document that and keep the case notes on that on our side.
And the majority of the time, if the behavior ceases,
And it's done.
then that's finished. So now, if the behavior ceases to cease, then you have an issue.
Right, if you change from honey bunny to sweetie pie, then you get to
Don't worry, I don't say.
But it's a good question. So again, claims of harassment focus on the recipient's perception of the behavior, not the intention. Not how that's just always, oh, well, he just always talks like that. No, it's the person's perception. Supervisors and or managers need to become aware of any personal behaviors or habits that could be perceived by their subordinate. This can be a teacher-professor situation. It could be, this is what we always looked at in our art class. Has to be very, very, very mindful. Employees believe that a supervisor holds power over them, okay? And that's what makes us quid pro quo. Therefore, you have to accept the offensive behavior in order to move forward in the organization, okay? What I think is important about this quid pro quo is action. If an employee perceives that the behavior is being delivered from someone who has power over them, that's not going to go along with the behavior. It will prevent them from moving forward, or it will have a negative impact on their job. And again, it can be something as small as you don't get the cushy job. You don't get the good assignment. You're going to have a little bit more that you have to do, or you're going to have to fill out 5 reports instead of 1. Hostile environment. Does anybody have any more questions about the quid pro quo? No? Okay. I think for supervisors especially, it's important to be aware of that. But now you also need to be aware of this one, because this is coworker to coworker, or from the subordinate up to the supervisor. Okay? So if you have someone that you're supervising and they keep calling you, yes, darling, yes, sweetheart, that could be considered, what is it? Harassment. Okay? And again, guess what would happen? HR would go to the subordinate and say, hey, you might want to, I don't think they actually would use gentle words like might. They would probably say, you should, you will no longer use these phrases because the perception is that someone else is uncomfortable with it. Okay? But that falls under hostile environment. Still sexual harassment, but hostile environment. So, sexual harassment occurs when the offensive conduct is of a sexual nature. It unreasonably interferes with an employee's work, and this is called the hostile work environment. It can occur just like we show right over here. A hostile environment behaviors can be verbal vulgarity. Could be something as bad as hearing things of a sexual nature, but it could be curse words. Someone could feel like they have a hostile work environment because someone uses bad language. The F word before everything. Those kinds of things. You know, this is vulgarity. We all know what vulgarity is, right? Yes? So it's very important to be aware of what's happening in the mouth. Also, inappropriate emails. So say somebody gets a really funny joke and their brother sent it to them and like, oh, this is hysterical, and they forward it on, but it's sexual in nature. That is considered hostile behavior and sexually harassing behaviors. What about explicit photos? Doesn't even have to be a photograph. It can be a sketch or a cartoon or a comic that is sexually inappropriate. So you want to be careful what you share with other people, especially if you're using FIT's email. So you got to be super careful about that. Statements or actions with double meanings. We always know what that is. And you're like, well, is it your intention that that double meaning was going to be sexually harassing? Maybe not. But if the person's perception of what you said that could be perceived as a double meaning, and I know everyone's like, are you kidding? Like, I'm just gonna not even talk anymore because anything can be perceived, right? You're like, I'm just gonna be quiet now. But the big thing now with the kids is the what he said. Oh, that's what he said. Oh, that's what she said. Might want to be a little bit careful with that joke because that one has got people into trouble. Yes, sir?
Along that same line, what if I say something and then someone has a dirty mind and they take it the wrong way?
That,
So they want to be like, oh, that's what she said, and then they get mad at me when
For-
I was talking about something at work with.
and so our big thing again was perception. So I know, it's just like her. She's like, I'm just going to be quiet from here on out. It falls down to perception. Yes, sir?
So legal burden of proof is perception.
Perception.
So there's no magical way to go in and take a snapshot of somebody's exact perception.
No, because it's happening here and here.
So just in case law,
Just
how far is this from scratch? Got any examples?
Yes, actually, I have some case studies that we're going to be doing in a little while. So, again, remember what I said in the beginning about the successful cases for sexual harassment have been repetitive. So if you just do something one time, there's less likelihood that there is going to be a successful lawsuit because your intention wasn't it, but it still is sexual harassment because the perception. Does that help you? They're not going to be able to probably, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak legal matters, but they aren't going to be able to sue you for billions of dollars based on something that you did. Although we're a litigious society, you know. There you go. Well done, well done. Very well done. So, yes, sir.
So, it's an engineering term. One piece, it's not really, it's a description.
Okay.
One piece fits into the other piece.
Yes,
The male piece fits into the female.
absolutely.
That's what she said. So here's the male piece, it's gotta fit into the female piece, it's gotta fit a certain way. So is that?
Well, that's what she said, right? It depends on the perception, person's perception. It's not like you can't. It's not like you can't teach. You need to be able to use that to be able to teach. If someone's perception is that it's sexually harassing, they would go and talk to human resources, and human resources would say, you know, well, that's part of what you're learning. That's part of the language. That's the technical term. But that person still has the right to go and talk to human resources about it.
And another way to do that too could be at the front end of the lecture to say, we're going to be discussing technical terms today, some of which are using the words male and female. And so you're setting the stage that the use of the words are specifically tied back to the engineering language that you're using.
And so then do you say it's gonna be offended by such language? Please leave the, because I teach that.
Well, you can also listen to what she's saying, is that you're saying this is part of the class. This is part of what we're learning to do here. It's not intended, so if you perceive it this way, it's not intended to be sexual in nature. This is just how in engineering we describe these
So
parts.
you could say that, we're gonna be talking about statues of David.
Yes. This is part of art.
It helps reduce the risk of the wrong perception because you're clearing the stage of the fact that you're discussing technical terms.
Did someone over here have a question? No? Okay, so let's look at the behaviors. Spoken words, written words. How about sounds people make? Right? Visual, it can be pictures. I already said it can be cartoons. calendars, posters, written statements, body language. There's some very inappropriate things that facial expressions can be perceived as sexual harassment. So be mindful of this. And then, of course, physical. Assault, impeding or blocking movement. Remember how I said about the touching against someone's wishes. So then there's hugging. Some people, by their personality, are huggers. Is that a problem? It's not a problem if the other person being hugged's perception is this is just a friendly embrace. So I don't want everybody to leave here and not ever want to touch or talk to anybody, okay? I just want you to be aware of what could potentially happen. Here's an exercise, and I'm going to ask you to do this. Write examples of sexually harassing behaviors, and this is going to be a 10-minute break. So take a little break. Feel free to go to the bathroom, grab something to drink, and take a few minutes to do the exercise. Yeah.
And then we're out. We do have to somewhat stay on time just because there's another class.
Yes, no,
afterwards,
and
so.
I think you told me that. So,
I did,
yeah.
okay.
And you know what? I will let them go a few minutes early because everybody's always happy if they're not sitting here right till
I think we're
10:30.
good. I
So.
don't think the class is till close to 11.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly. Karen's enjoying it.
Oh, good.
So she's staying the entire time.
Oh.
She's enjoying it.
Well,
that
that's
much,
a
so.
good thing.
Yeah.
Good.
So she
Okay.
may or may not pop up afterwards to close it out or whatever, but you're fine to close it out. Just the feedback forms that we
I'm gonna
have,
address that right now.
Yours
Okay.
sign
Oh, yeah, and
sheet.
that's the thing I'll get from you. So I don't need to sign in as much. Yeah, I should get the sign in as well. So good.
You want me to scan? No, just give it back to
Yeah,
me.
just give it to me. It's fine. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody had an opportunity. All right, everybody, we're going to go until about 10:30. We're going to do case studies at about 10 o'clock. So you're going to have a little bit of a break then again. I just want to make sure that you know what to expect. I'm also going to ask you to please make sure, if you have a chance, to fill out the little survey, give some feedback, and you can wait till the end, just leave it at your seat or turn it in right over here to Linda if you want to. So everybody has one of these. Now, everybody did have a chance to come up with some interesting things. I'm going to run through the ones I have, but I want you to share an example if it's not part of what I have to share. Okay? So, sexual harassment behaviors, let's think about verbal. Can be derogatory comments. It can be comments about clothing, personal behavior, or the person's body, right? We're talking, can be something about feet or fingers. It doesn't just have to be about the under the bathing suit area, okay? Requests for sexual favors. This is very interesting because this is verbal. It's just the verbal request of it and then repeating the request for dates. So when are we going on that date? So, John, when are we going to that movie together? Okay. Unwelcome terms of endearment such as honey, dear, sweetheart, babe, lovey, and then tales or stories of sexual nature. You don't want to encourage behavior where someone comes back after a trip to hedonism and gives all the details, okay? So be aware that that's something you kind of want to squash and document right away. Lies or rumors about a person's personal life or their sex life, okay? So this is verbal. Then there's body language. And I would you mind sharing the body language? This is something that we all kind of know about, this little button, but the body language in this situation might have been someone's perception. So please share with the group.
So I was talking with Saffron during the break. I think we've all read and heard about the Matt Lauer story, right? And the fact that there was a button in his office that locked the door. And what's coming out of that, and one of the questions that I've seen is, well, where was HR in terms of the button? So the button may have been placed from a safety standpoint for him, so that if the news station is, stormed by bad people, he's able to lock himself in his newsroom and still broadcast out. But what has happened over the years is that as he's had one-on-one meetings with the females, they know that that button exists. And so the question has come up of, now has he created a power shift because he's, was at the top of the food chain where the female feels intimidated being alone in that office knowing that she can be locked in. So he may have said nothing wrong during that conversation one-on-one, but the perception of that female is that I'm now in a situation where there's the lion and I'm the lamb and I can get beaten up.
So again, the intention versus the perception. The intention, like she said, maybe it was just a security feature, that everyone knew he had a button there right behind his desk that he could push and his door was locked. But maybe his body language with his proximity to that button might have made someone feel uncomfortable, and their perception, even though it wasn't his intention to ever push it, that's still sexual harassment. Okay? Let's look at more about body language. How about doing this, the once over glare, the up and down, okay? We call it elevator eyes. Yes,
So-
go ahead.
So I'm the director of machine shop. The
Yes,
student walks into the room and I have to check to see that they're dressed properly.
yes.
That's what I have to do.
But you're also the guy that's talking about male and female parts.
Well, yes, I'm a big trouble. I can't talk.
No,
I
it's,
talk about slip fits and press fits and all that.
but it's inappropriate only if it is.
What if, whoever the person is, if they perceive that I'm looking at them instead of just looking at them?
Yeah. So maybe you should be mindful of that, and when you are doing the elevator eyes, be like, let's just make sure we're all set for what we're going to be doing today. Again, like she said, you can precede the behavior with a vocalization of what's about to happen. Yes? We want to make sure that you're not making sexual gestures or facial expressions, winking, licking the lips, hey, you know, and staring. Now, a lot of people have ADD and are just staring off thinking about the 100,000 things in their brain. A lot of people are tired and didn't get their coffee and are staring off. Again, just be aware of it because it's the person's perception, not the intention. How about visual? Showing your camera phone. Look, this is where we were. It's inappropriate if the perception of the, I'm not saying you can't come back from hedonism and share the pictures that you want with a coworker. I'm just saying it's probably not a good idea. If you want to share something, share it at home or when you're off the campus having lunch together. Displaying jokes of a sexual nature, sending emails, especially if you're sending from your, we address that again, from your school email. So please be super aware of that. Now, physical. This is what people more think about when they think about sexual harassment, okay? And you all had a chance to jot down some examples that you could think, but uninvited massage around the neck or shoulder or anywhere, okay? You might want to not put your hands actually on someone else, being mindful that it's the perception. Touching the person's clothing or coming along and touching their hair. Doesn't have to be male on female or female on male. It can be female on female. Stalking. Well, I don't think anybody's got questions about if that's appropriate or not, right? If you do, please go talk to HR immediately. Blocking someone's way or in a hallway, where you're kind of positioning your body so that they have to somehow encounter you. Or unwanted hugging, kissing, patting, or stroking. Now, we addressed hugging earlier. If someone has that personality that they're a hugger and it's not like that full frontal holding too long, you know, and it's just, if you're worried and you are a hugger, do the side hug, you know. Just be aware, or no hug at all. Standing close to or rubbing against the person, the elevator's full of people, someone's in the elevator a lot, you know. Excessively lengthy handshakes. And then grabbing, of course, indecent exposure. If you're not sure if mooning or flashing is appropriate, you might want to talk to your supervisor about how you got to be a supervisor. Now, it's unwelcome behavior if the person tells you that your behavior is unwelcome, okay? It's also unwelcome if you would not want your behavior shown on the evening news. We live in a society where there really are cameras everywhere. So I think if you live a life of, I could be at any point Big Brother watching, at any point, just be aware, because that will help you moderate your behavior. That will help you be mindful of what the perception could be. And then, of course, if someone starts avoiding you. I beg your pardon? So it could be unwelcome behavior that you're doing to someone. If they they no longer are in contact with you or not communicating with you as much, they're kind of avoiding you, you might think, this might be unwanted. Majority of sexual harassment goes unreported. So I'm not asking you to just not do what someone's going to report. I'm asking you to create a pleasant environment by just not participating in behaviors that can be perceived that way. Why is that important? What do employees actually want? They just want to make that behavior stop. Not everybody's out to sue you. Majority of people, when there's sexual harassment, just want the behavior to stop. Employees want a cordial work environment. They don't want to have to avoid someone because their behavior is bizarre. They've got kind of creepy things on their phone, okay? And they usually file claims when they feel they cannot handle the matter on their own. Again, remember what I said, majority of people are sexually harassed and never actually do anything about it. Why employees don't report? Their fear of retaliation. They fear they may lose job opportunities. They fear management and coworkers will view them as what? The tattletale troublemaker. These are not reasons why you shouldn't report. These are just reasons why some people don't report. So if you see someone is uncomfortable, it's okay to address them and say, is everything all right? Fear of rejection by peers, fear of not being believed, and then fear of being embarrassed. Who's going to know? Your HR, they can come and report to you at any point, right? And HR knows what they're doing. It's not going to be embarrassment associated with you reporting. They have a way of dealing with things without it being on the news. So, tangible employee action. This is called the TEA. What is tangible employee action? It's the biggest risk to the employer. It's when the harassment by a supervisor results in tangible employment action. That can be punishment for denying or a reward for submitting. So let's say a supervisor is in a relationship with someone of a sexual nature, and now that person is getting all the promotions, all the plum assignments. That's still considered illegal. It's still considered sexual harassment. Okay. The TA is a significant change in employee status. So this again, tangible, firing or hiring, failure to promote, actually a demotion. Okay, that can happen as well. Sexual favoritism may also be sexual harassment. Is that one hard to understand? No? We're good? Okay. And then submitting to favors to keep job status does not negate a claim of harassment. If you take a minute to look at some of these little case scenarios, I'm going to ask if anybody would like to read case number 1. Is anybody a good reader? No? All right, I'm going to do it. So this is on page 4 on the Resource for Living. So here's some case studies. Bill is Darla's coworker. Okay? He has told her on 2 occasions that she is cute and she's pretty. He has not asked her out, and she laughs it off, and the 2 of them work well together otherwise. Case 2. Sam is the manager of the department. He whistles at Jessica once and hinted that if she went out with him, he'd make sure that she didn't get a drudge work assignment. She told him to stop. He never did it again. Okay? Never did it again. So, in case number 1, there's no power differential. Okay? So it's not considered harassment. How about case number 2? There is a power differential. So this would be the quid pro quo. Guys are brilliant. All right, let's take a look at Ethan. Ethan's a coworker of Christine's. He got inebriated at a company bowling tournament 6 months ago, and he tried to kiss her in the parking lot. Okay? So parking lot was not at work, was the parking lot of a public place, bowling alley. He apologized the next day, but he continues to tell her how attractive she is. She then goes and tells another coworker that she feels stressed out and scared by Bill's attention to her. Is anybody not sure if that is considered sexual harassment? I'm going to read this to you because I think it's pertain. There's no power differential, so it's actually just a hostile environment. It's probably a strong case for sexual harassment claim. There's also a substance abuse component to this, okay? The company policy regarding the use of alcohol at company functions needs to be included. This has strong potential for escalation, especially if Bill also has an alcohol problem. As Bill's supervisor, he needs to be warned and corrective action needs to be taken and it has to be referred to EAP. Remember how I said document? You want to say at this time this happened, at this time this happened, this was referred to HR. You're not the investigators, right? You don't have to decide if it is. Talk to your HR company, your HR department. So, HR and upper management needs to be consulted as this has a high risk for potential legal action, right? Now, sexual harassment is not only something that someone's going to go sue about. Like I said, majority of people aren't going to do anything. All employees really want is a comfortable environment to work in, okay? Let's take a look together at Marie, number 4. Marie does not directly supervise Derek, but she is a manager in another department that works closely with his department. This must be along the lines of the 2 different lines that you were asking about. She told Derek for the first time last week that if he didn't go out with her and satisfy her, can't even say that word out loud, but we all know what it is, that she would make sure he didn't get a promotion. Okay, she's not his supervisor, but she is a supervisor, but she's not his supervisor. She also came up behind him later in the day and she pressed herself up against him while massaging his shoulders. So far, Derek has not made a complaint about it. What do you think about that one? There's a power differential there, even though she's not his supervisor directly. There's still a power differential, so what would that be? No. Yes. As a clear-cut case of it. This could escalate into sexual assault. Maria clearly has poor impulse control. This is a 2-time low-frequency but severe case, high severity, that could stand alone as a sexual harassment claim. Marie's supervisor needs to discipline her, including many corrective actions such as whatever they determine. Their company has serious liability in this case. Anybody have any questions about Marie and Derek?
Can I give another example?
Yes, please. That would be. Do you want to come on up here so that?
No, Tristan didn't do anything, but he had a great example. So Tristan's an AVP, and his example was he quite often goes to attend events in the community or around campus, and how would he respond if there is a female that sits next to him on a routine basis at these events and flirts with him? And so this is one, and now I'm going to pick on Brian, because he has a term called rarefied air. The higher up on the food chain that you are within the university, the more cautious you have to be, because the air is thinner at the top. And so, when you look at it from that situation, he may have absolutely no direct contact with this individual at all. But in her mind, she may think that he can get to Dr. McKay. So I'm going to make friends with this person who has influence within the executive ranks because they're higher on the chain and the air is thinner. And now you have a perception of an issue where he's trying to figure out how to back out of that conversation or constant interaction with that particular individual. And the best way to do that is to break the chain. So if that person is continuing to sit next to you and, you know, make friendly because they're hoping to get something out of the conversation, then you want to kind of be cautious and look, you know, if it's in a crowd, say, okay, I'm going to go sit now next to Deb because I know that there's an empty chair in between the two of you all and that individual can't get to me in that public environment. So it requires us to start tap dancing a little bit. And you really want to be careful of how those interactions are occurring once you reach that AVP level and above.
It's always wise to err on the side of caution.
Yes.
It's always wise. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5 together. A group of workers are known friends. They're often joking around and have been known to play pranks on one another. One of them sends a sexual joke over email while at work. The email, it's only going to that group of friends. The email goes out, and what happens? All of a sudden, it goes to the entire office. We've all pressed the send button and tried to be like, no, come back, come back. But it's too late, right? So it includes a suggestive picture. The person who sent the email claims it was only supposed to go to that little group of friends. It's an inside joke, but again, it's on the company's email, even if it's just to those group of friends. Okay? I love that this one is number 5. Anybody want to answer? Go ahead.
I just have a question.
Yes. Okay, well, there's no power differential here in number 5. You can ask your questions. Okay, if you have a... Go ahead. Yes, please.
I read the HR email, no, the IT email calls. And I have my own personal phone, and it's connected to our email, and I answer things with it. My boss made a very specific question to me a few months ago, as though he had been to some sort of training, I think, and he said, "Do you use your own email for work?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you aware of what, that's a, not the university's email, but it's for my device. So my device is considered the university's email.
If you are,
Even if it's on my own, I got 2 accounts.
you own your phone, but you're linking to your FIT email.
Yes, and also my own
Then
personal
yes,
account.
we have the right to review anything within that device because you're linking it to the FIT email or you're logging in to pause to do something. So we don't care where the bill is being paid for the device. It's what you are doing at point that it is an FIT email account.
Okay, but if there's a home email account on the phone, there's 2 email accounts.
Doesn't matter.
Correct.
Doesn't matter. The point that you start linking your stuff to that phone, then we can have the opportunity to go in and review anything within the FIT email account.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Now, if you were the supervisor of this individual, the one that sent it out to everybody, as a supervisor or manager, what steps would you take to deal with it? Would you only talk to the one person that sent it? Or would you maybe address the group that has had this behavior of sending things back and forth to each other?
The group as a whole is in the wrong.
Absolutely.
And actually, the university has policies in terms of our acceptable use of electronic equipment policy, all of which is a violation of that policy and actionable. So, I mean.
Did everybody hear what he had to say? Can you say that again, please?
The universities, we all agree to the standards of use of electronic equipment at the university, whether it's the BYOD, bring your own device that Dr. Lane's talking about, or it's university hardware. And so if we're using it, we have to abide by those rules and regulations, and all of those things are detailed. So regardless that it's harassment or not, which it is, but the university can sanction the employee for just misuse of electronic equipment and take pretty severe action.
Even if the intention, again, was only to go to those even if the email only went to those few friends, it's still not appropriate, okay? Getting support. This is what I want to encourage, is promptly seeking the assistance of your human resources in any situation that involves allegations or an observation of harassment. So if you're not even in any way, shape, or form involved in the harassment, but you observe it, it still would behoove you to do what? Contact human resources about it, okay? Not allowing retaliatory behavior against the accused or any person involved in the investigation, or permitting any type of retaliation between the parties involved in a complaint. And human resources is trained. They know how to deal with it to not make it, to diffuse the situation, not escalate the situation, okay? Use your EAP management resource and take a look at your employee guide. Effective complaint procedures. It's important. Every incident of sexual harassment should include clear documentation. Document, document, document. Complaint procedure. You're not an investigator. Please make sure that you understand that you're just documenting, okay? We do not encourage you investigate. We want you just to document it, talk to HR, and they'll take it over, right? To prevent harassment, management and supervisors should be responsible for what? Because this is the group, right? You want to ensure that the employees are aware of and in compliance what the company's, the university's sexual harassment policy is, okay? If you're not sure, educate yourself. Find out. Linda, they have access to all the employee handbooks, you know? So feel free to check and double check yourself. If you see something and you're not sure if it's sexual harassment and you know that you're supposed to report even if you're not involved in it, ask. Because we are such a litigious society, it's critically important to do what? CYA. Okay. Training, like you're doing today, aren't you guys glad you're all here on a Friday morning listening to my brilliant presentation? But it's important to have team meetings regularly so that everybody's on the same page. You want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. Supervising employees' work environment is in a manner that discourages any form of harassment. So you can encourage someone not to bring the mechanics calendar in and put it up. You can, with just a little bit of guidance, be a good example of what is or isn't appropriate, you know? Someone could even be a masseuse and just want to bless their coworkers with a little neck rub halfway through the week. But again, remember, it's the perception. It's not the intention, it's the perception. And then monitoring the work environment to identify subtle as well as overt situations of sexual harassment. It's the subtle ones that sometimes you're just not sure about. You're like, well, that might just not be okay. Protection against harassment claims. Managers and supervisors can help defend themselves or the university against sexual harassment by making sure that they do these two things. Exercise reasonable care, okay? You want to prevent and promptly correct any behavior that could create a hostile work environment. Offer preventative or corrective actions which the employee unreasonably failed to take advantage of. Any questions about that?
So from a supervisor's standpoint, if they know that a situation is occurring within their group and they choose to look the other way because it's a good group, they've worked together for the last 15 or 20 years and they're all friends and buddies, could they also be named in a lawsuit?
100%. 100%. Did everybody over there hear this? If you are a supervisor and you see something happening that's been going on for decades, but you know that it's on that scope of sexual harassment. You choose to not report or not get help from HR about it or not document because you don't want to rock the boat, right? Kind of want to leave things well enough alone. She asked, can you still be a party to the lawsuit for sexual harassment in that case? Raise your hand if you think yes. I didn't ask to raise your hand if you think no, because that means I haven't taught you well enough, so I don't want that to reflect on me. All right, policy review. Managers should know the organization's specific policies that relate to sexual harassment, and you have to take the time to review the policy your company has adopted. You're all here today. You've given me 2 hours of your very, very valuable time, but you all have people that you can encourage to take a little review. Hey, you know what? You might want to just take a look. I sat in this 2-hour thing. You might want to go over the handbook and just address that. I don't want to have to sit with you for 2 hours, but you're encouraging them to be proactive and understanding. I think everybody here today learned that perception is what's most critical, not intention. And when you're giving this information to the people that you supervise, some people tend to be a little bit cautious. They don't want to give too much information because they don't want to feed the idea of, hey, you know what, this could be sexual harassment if no one had ever thought of it before. That's not what's happening. By educating the people that you supervise that something could be perceived as sexual harassment, you're actually helping them, okay? Everybody understand what I'm saying? Some people are nervous to even bring it up because they don't want someone who had never even thought about something as sexual harassment, now all of a sudden they're stirring things up. It's still better to make sure that you're sharing the knowledge that you received here today. I'm going to ask you to just go to your pretest. Everybody had an opportunity to do that? It's going to take me about 15 minutes to go through this with you, but I want you to stop and ask me any questions if you're not sure. So, take a look at your test. The first one, here's the key. I'm not going to ever want you to be wrong, so I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you think number 1 is false. Okay? Most instances of sexual harassment involve requests for sexual favors. No. We learned that it can be what? It can be somebody touching you. Can be somebody doing the elevator eyes. Can be someone sharing an inappropriate joke. Doesn't have to do at all with sexual favors, and it's still considered sexual harassment. So sexual harassment includes many other behaviors besides requests for sexual favors. They can be verbal, visual, physical, and nonverbal. Anybody have a question about that? Verbal, visual, nonverbal. Remember how I said it could be sounds even? Could just be inappropriate noise that you're making. Okay? Let's take a look at number 2 together. Sexual harassment is only one type of sex discrimination. Raise your hand if you answered true. Okay? So that one's true. There are other types of sexual discrimination, treating someone differently because of their gender with no sexual overtones. Examples, refusing to hire someone because they are male or female. So you're interviewing someone, you're like, so you're a female, are you planning on having kids? Not okay.
And someone asked, what kind of birth control do you use?
Not okay. not okay.
How do restaurants get away with hiring either all male or all female, say wait staff, etc.? Well, even,
right.
the worst, but
no, it's actually,
see how they roll.
No, I agree. My son worked at the Sunny's over in Merritt Island for 3 years, hoping that he'd get to be a server all his. And they're like, nope, it's only girls, only girls. And I was like, wait, that's not okay. But then, it's one of those things like, do you bring it up or do you not? I don't want him to be stuck washing dishes for the next year, But I also need to bring up that this might not be okay. It's a very interesting question. People can be hired, like let's think about the mermaids over at Wikiwachi. Okay? They're specifically hired to be a mermaid, not a merman. Okay? And so it just depends on that kind of legality.
So a restaurant can have a policy saying we have only waitresses?
Well, someone could take that to a court and say that it's discrimination. Yeah, someone could take that to a court. And she made a good point. If someone wanted to be a merman, they might even win right now. Okay, so how about number 3? If employee A acts in a sexually harassing way towards employee B, A's intention carries more weight than B, than the harm, okay? And everybody, if you raise your hand if you got false, please. Okay. If you thought number 3 was true, please meet with me afterwards. Okay. How about number 4? An employee is not liable for the sexual harassment. Employer is not liable for the sexual harassment of an employee unless that employee lost specific benefits or was fired. Raise your hand if you think it's false. Okay. All right. And I think this one actually is kind of key. The employee is also responsible for maintaining a respectful, non-hostile work environment. Okay? That's what your responsibility is as the employer. Just because someone's job wasn't affected, they still got their raises, their promotions, harassment may still cause an offensive environment. Okay. How about number 5? Sexual harassing actions are characterized by their unwelcome and often repetitive nature. Raise your hand if you got true for that. Now, it can be a one-time egregious act. We discussed that right in the beginning. But it tends to be something that's of repetitive nature. If HR has intervened and asked you to stop saying darling and honey, and now you're saying sweetie pie, might want to rethink the behavior. How about number 6? A court can require a sexual harasser to pay part of the damages to the victim of harassment. Raise your hand if that one's true. Yeah. That you now can be liable. You're not protected by the university for your bad behavior. Okay? You're responsible for the choices you make. How about number 7? Employers can be held liable for the sexual harassment of an employee by a non-employee. True. So when I came in here asking you guys to hook me up on a date, not okay. Not all right, okay? And the school can be held liable for that. Just so.
On school property?
Mm-hmm.
So if it happened in Publix.
No, if I ran into you in Publix and said, hey, did you give my number to anyone? Ideally, I'm trained well enough not to do it. It's still inappropriate. Okay? All right, how about number 8? An employer can be liable. I beg your pardon? Oh, yeah, sorry.
The school's kind of divided between public and private roads.
Yes.
Somebody's walking down the road that doesn't belong to the university and catcalling to a student or something like that on a public road.
That's a great question. That's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a harassment.
Yeah.
Even though it's on a public street, absolutely.
Do you hear that? So an employee is on the campus, or students on the campus, but there's someone walking down Babcock and they are catcalling students. Is that considered harassment? And the dean of students said yes. Yes, it is.
I have a question.
So, yes, ma'am.
Karen, many universities are going to subcontractors. You know, we have the bookstore and we have the custodial staff. What do we do to make sure that those folks get paid as well?
Same, they are required to follow the same policies and procedures as part of their contract when they sign up with us. They have to accept that as long as they're working on our property, our rules. Yeah, so we occasionally, you know, I know Linda has had a couple issues with National over the years, and we address it just the same as we do any other employee situation.
Do they get the training opportunities?
From coming into these meetings,
Yeah.
I think it depends on what level they are. I know, like some of the summer, like Wellspring, some of the summer camps that have been out here, I don't know. We, personally, since I've been here at HR, we haven't personally invited them to these.
Well, National, they work night, but
Right.
Do you want to share your question? Did the rest of you hear what she was asking about?
subcontractors like National and bookstore and all those things, what kind of training
Do they get?
expectations do we have of them to train their personnel?
But again, remember, I'm a non-employee, but the school still can be held liable for my behaviors here.
Like the subcontractor would be responsible for bearing the cost of training the employees for the university.
They'd be responsible for, I would think, obviously compliance with all of our issues, our rules, and our regulations, but
National would probably have to train them
Okay.
as well.
All right, can we do number 8 together? An employer can be liable for sexually harassing behavior of management personnel even if it is unaware of that behavior. Raise your hand if you answered true. And the next one, there are 2 types of sexual harassment: quid pro quo and hostile environment. Raise your hand if you answered true to that one. Brilliant. You guys all going to get a gold star if you get this next one right. Are we ready? Sexually suggestive visual materials in the workplace don't create a liability unless the owner shows them to someone else on purpose. Raise your hand if it was false. You guys are brilliant. Must be FIT. All right, so sexually suggestive materials create a risk even if the owner isn't showing them on purpose, and people walking by or viewing the material may be offended and file a harassment, especially if the owner refuses to remove the material after they were asked to. In summary, this is what we're looking at, and I'm going to give you time for questions and answers as well. But in summary, this is what we're looking at. You, the manager and supervisor, are the key to what? Preventing harassment. It's more than simply being self-aware. It's sharing that knowledge, okay? So you are the key to preventing harassment. And you can do this by understanding your obligations both legally and professionally. You're not simply just looking at a way to prevent a legal case, okay? You're also looking at how to provide a professional environment. And I know that we focused a lot on what could someone be charged with, what couldn't they, but you want to promote a professional environment, okay? You also want to keep in mind that the law sees no difference between a supervisor who engages in harassing behavior or one who witnesses it and fails to act. And I touched on this a couple of times. If you see sexual harassment and you choose to not act on it because you are in that supervisory capacity, that is appropriate or inappropriate? Inappropriate, okay? Harassment of any kind hurts your employees and the productivity of the employees. Everyone has an investment in creating a workplace that is healthy, that is respectful, and that's free from harassment. This is something that is systemic, right? It's that little drop in the ripple effect. The more you can promote a professional environment, and the more you can encourage people not to engage in sexually harassing behaviors, the better your entire campus environment is going to be. Anybody have any questions? Because if you have the question, someone else probably wants to ask it as well. Yes, sir?
Okay, if you could distill down one thing that managers could do to try to stop this sort of stuff from happening, what would it be?
Okay, so his question was, if you could do one thing that a manager could do, if you could say one thing that a manager could do to reduce this, to stop this, you know, so you're taking that cone of information and you're narrowing it down. What would the one thing be? I would say awareness. Awareness. Sharing awareness, because a lot of people don't realize that what they see as just their usual behavior could be perceived as sexual harassment. And I think that would be the best answer. Anyone have a better answer than that? So just raising awareness. Hey, you know what? This could be, you might want to just consider that someone could perceive this as. Yes, sir?
I would say fostering an environment where the people you work with or who work for you feel safe and protected enough to come to you and say, I saw this, I'm not sure, or whatever.
Yes, and so he said he would foster an environment where people feel comfortable, welcome to come to you and be able to kind of touch base and say, you know, I saw this. So if you can encourage that type of an environment where people are welcome and feel okay about coming without there being anything detrimental to them inquiring about something. Yes, sir?
I fully agree with what Adam said. I think just the fact that HR takes the time to pull together all these people to touch on a subject that people generally don't like to talk about.
Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable
and
subject.
In front of the curve, meet with your people before there's an issue.
Yes.
Go over it, and even if you have to do it once every 3 months, just do it so everybody at some point knows we don't do this, it's not appropriate, it doesn't even enter the world, like we have cybersecurity training. Never click on something that you're even doubtful of.
Yes.
That type of thing, because we've been told very frequently, and on the sexual harassment side, if we do expand training and do it frequently, because there's always new people coming into the university.
That's
that
true.
have to be brought on board.
That's true. And it is becoming one of those topics that is so freely now discussed in the media. Yes, ma'am.
So I worked at an institution years ago that purchased a preventing sexual harassment training product.
Yes.
And everyone was, the supervisors first had to go through it, and then everyone, including the faculty, and then after.
Just speak up so they can hear. Can you hear what she's saying?
And it spit out you had to do a mastery test at the end, and it had spit out your certificate, and they filed those appropriately, so that, and this happened.
This actually happened to her. Everyone had a
court.
certificate.
We were taken to court for 2 custodians harassing, one harassing the other, peer to peer.
So that would not be quid pro quo, right?
I went down to Orlando, and I was a witness, and I was in HR training at the time, and that attorney said to me, can you say that that employee received that training? I said, yes, sir, I can absolutely say that.
And here's a certificate to prove it.
And there were other questions. These were custodians, and at the time, they didn't even have computers. So we had to go in and train them with skits and paper bags, quid pro quo. It was a very challenging time that long ago. So no, we're not ahead of the curve.
Yes. But an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so I think that you're 100% correct. The important thing is you're not alone. That's, if I can really share with you one thing, you're not alone in this. And these are other ways that you can have further assistance. This is not something that you have to deal with by yourself, but it is something that you have to be super mindful of. And exactly what you said, it's not something that's new, but it is something that you need to be super aware of, and it comes down to perception. Be aware that your perception in this situation is more important than the person's intention. Okay? Make sure that before you leave, you do please fill out your handy-dandy seminar evaluation. I will be here for about 10 minutes after if you have something that you would like to ask me. And then I think our HR person is going to finish off with a little statement.
Just to wrap back around to what I talked about at the beginning with the Not Here program, Tristan kind of mentioned it too, and I like what Rosemary said. We have the opportunity as supervisors and managers to be the ones to say, not here. You know, that we're not going to tolerate behavior. We want to remain professional. And so that's kind of why I was thinking of this as a tagline, because it's our mission. It's our logo, our goal as managers, and it can't be just HR. There's only 8 of us. And the ability to get down into your departments and your weeds, we could train on this subject for the next year and not hit all of our employees. So we need your help. We need to have the grassroots effort to make sure this is going out. We are looking at an electronic system so that we can push training down into those lower ranks. And so again, I just say if that's something that you believe in and you're passionate about it and you want to be a part of that, please let me know, and we'd love to be able to put this task force together and start working on change within the campus and the community that we're involved in. And I just want to say thank you to Saffron. She's coming back for diversity training in March, and that is going to close out our academic year training for managers. So we hope to see you all there for that as well. And we really appreciate your time. So round of applause.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.